Red versus blue, Godzilla versus Kong, Lakers versus Celtics, or VEG versus the entire Asian continent.
And that just proves that West is the best and East is ass.
None of these rivals even come close to that of the DLQ versus the Locus. Ever since the Locus was released years ago, the debate has raged on which is the better sniper in COD Mobile. And today I am here to put an end to it and finally answer which sniper is better. For you specifically. Obviously, whichever sniper is better for you depends on your playstyle in a couple key points, but in today's video I'm going to talk about the differences between the two so that by the end of the video you can decide exactly which one is better for you. In the future I'm going to do a video covering all of the snipers, but that is a lot of effort that's going to take me a lot more time, so we're saving that for the future. So first things first, let's go ahead and talk about the builds that we'll be looking at in today's video. So first with the DLQ, this is the build. It's mostly focused on ADS speed, and then there's also that light suppressor and extended mag because you can only have 3 ADS speed attachments. And honestly, this is a build that is pretty much universal for the DLQ. You'll very rarely see a DLQ that is different than this, except maybe like there's going to be FMJ instead of like the OWC laser for specifically S&D, or maybe swap the extended mag for FMJ or something. I don't know, but again, there's very little variation with this, so that's why we're going with this build. Then for the Locus, there's two key different builds that we're going to be looking at. The first one is the one without the stopping power rounds, so essentially without the rounds that make it a more lethal sniper. And then we'll also be looking at a build that has stopping power rounds to make it more lethal and more similar to the DLQ essentially. Then also there is a third build that we'll talk about a little bit, and that's basically the stopping power Locus, but suppressed, where you take away the laser and instead use a suppressor. That one will be talked about a little bit, but it's not a key focus. So those are the builds that we're going to be looking at the stats of today. And the reason I'm looking at builds and not the base gun is because base guns really don't tell the full story. And again, with snipers, there's very little variation in how the guns are built. So we can do something like this where we look at final builds for their stats. Okay, so now let's go ahead and actually look at the stats, starting with the ADS time. And one more time, all of these stats are based on the builds that I showed earlier. So the DLQ is a ADS time of 369 milliseconds. The Locus is 345. The Locus stopping power is 368, and the Locus stopping power suppressed is 381. So the fastest possible is the Locus, and then the Locus stopping power and the DLQ are actually basically exactly tied, and then a little bit slower is the Locus stopping power suppressed. I do want to note here that the range of these ADS times is actually very, very tight. So from the Locus, the base Locus being 345 and then jumping to like the Locus stopping power and the DLQ, that's only a difference of right around 23 milliseconds, which is a little bit more than like a frame at 60 frames per second. So it's a very, very minor difference, to be honest. It's very unlikely you would notice an ADS speed difference with these weapons unless you use them all the time and you get super familiar, but for the most part, almost identical. Next up is going to be the sprint to fire stat. This is basically when you're running and you press the shoot button or ADS button, how much time it takes for you to stop sprinting and lift your gun up and shoot or whatever. And this honestly doesn't matter if you're a skillful player, because if you slide, you'll automatically cancel having to have a sprint to fire time. So that's why you'll see really good snipers and quickscopers and all that. Either they'll already be ADS'd when someone's coming by, or if they have to shoot someone, they'll first slide and then ADS. But regardless, the stats for this is the DLQ 220, Locus 200, Locus stopping power 210, Locus stopping power suppressed 220. So Locus clearly has the DLQ beat on this unless it is both stopping power and suppressed. Again, this doesn't matter if you know what you're doing, but if you don't know what you're doing, it is still a pretty minor difference between the different builds. Next up is going to be one that's really important to me personally, and that is going to be the movement stats. So obviously there's a lot of numbers here, and I'm not going to break down the actual speeds of each weapon, but what I do want to highlight is the red numbers that you're seeing on your screen. Basically, the red number is a way for you to more easily understand what that speed actually is in comparison to other weapons in the game. So if you see the number 0, that's actually the slowest of that speed that's inside of the game. Now, it's not actually the slowest inside the game. It's a pretty rough approximation, but it's very close. So for example, the ADS movement speed of the DLQ, so when you're ADS'd and moving, it is basically the slowest in the game. Again, I don't think it's actually the slowest, but it is very, very close. And then if you saw a number that was 100, it would be the fastest in the game. Now, obviously here, we don't have any number that's close to that because we're not looking at, you know, like SMGs and melee weapons and stuff like that. But as you can tell with the Locus, we're getting numbers like 37, which is much higher on the scale of, you know, speed compared to other weapons. So mainly what we're taking away from this is that the DLQ's movement is very, very slow, and then the Locus's is very, very fast for a sniper. For the rest of the game, it's just a little bit, or not the rest of the game, but the rest of the weapons in the game, it's just about average or a little below average, except with the ADS movement speed. It's 17, which is very low, but still higher than the DLQ. Now, the importance of this stat obviously depends on how you play and how aggressive you play. Me, as a very aggressive sniper, I really like the mobility of the Locus. For the raise and drop time, these stats are courtesy of Signu, and he clocked them in at pretty much identical numbers, with the raise time being 28 frames for both weapons and the drop time being 16 and 15, DLQ 16, Locus 15, which could be just a very small deviation in the measurement, but I'm not sure, honestly. One frame, though, is such a small difference that it really doesn't matter. But I do notice for me personally that the Locus feels faster when I'm swapping, but that could just be a total thing that's inside of my head. But based on the numbers, it does seem like it's slightly faster. Next up is going to be the magazine. Now, for the DLQ, we have a 8-round mag with the extended mag, again, the build that we're talking about here, and then the reload time of 1.92 and a empty reload of 2.38. Empty reload is when your gun runs out of ammo and does the reload animation. That's how long it takes before you have the ammo in your mag, not for the animation to complete. Then the Locus we have basically identical, except that the empty reload is actually faster than the normal reload based on the stats. I don't know if that's true or it's a bug, but apparently your empty reload is faster, and a lot faster than the DLQ is empty reload, which is 2.38, and then again Locus is 1.8. So in terms of this, they're pretty much tied, but the Locus is a little bit faster, assuming the empty reload is a correct stat. Next up is going to be the steady aim count, and this is basically how long it takes for your gun to stop being steady and start having sway. And the DLQ has a 1.8 second, and then the Locus and Locus stopping power has a 2 second, which means that the Locus is better in this regard because it takes longer. You stay steady for longer. Although with this, honestly, you can just double tap the ADS button and you'll instantly reset that timer, which you'll see pros do all the time. So this stat doesn't really matter too much, but Locus does take the lead on it. When it comes to lethal zones for these weapons, the DLQ and the Locus stopping power are going to be identical, which basically is that you can one-shot someone as long as you don't hit them in the legs. If you don't hit someone in the legs with the Locus stopping power or the DLQ, you will one-shot, one-kill them. That is, unless you're wall banging people, but that's a different thing for a different time. Wall banging gets really complex based on materials and all that, so we're not going to talk about it. And also, it's pretty, I don't know, we're just not going to talk about it right now. So again, DLQ and Locus with the stopping power are the exact same, just don't hit the legs and you're good. But the Locus without the stopping power, you have to be hitting either the head, the chest, or the arms. You can't hit the stomach area, which is right around here and below. And then obviously you can't hit the legs as well. That won't be a one-shot, one-kill unless they're already low HP. So the difference between the Locus and the Locus stopping power and DLQ is about just this stomach area right here. So just avoid that and you'll be good, but that is easier said than done. The only time I won't use stopping power on the Locus is when I'm feeling really, really on, because I hate hit markers so much, and just that amount of stomach area does result in a pretty decent margin of more hit markers when you are playing. Next up is going to be the fire interval. This is essentially the time in between your shots. So if you press the fire button, you'll have this much time until you can press the fire button again. For the DLQ, it is 1200 milliseconds. The Locus is 1000 milliseconds. And then right in the middle of the two is the Locus with the stopping power rounds at 1100 milliseconds. So a difference of 100 milliseconds between each of these three. Now, the importance of this stat really depends from person to person and your playstyle. If you're playing slower, this time won't matter as much. But if you're playing very aggressive, that 100 milliseconds can be the difference between life and death all the time. That 100 milliseconds is a very big difference when you're in someone's face and they're trying to shoot you and you're sliding all over the place, just waiting for your gun to even be able to get the second shot off. So if you're aggressive, again, this difference in fire interval is pretty important. Okay, so my final conclusion is that based on the stats, I think the Locus is better. I really don't get the benefit of using the DLQ unless you're playing really, really slow. I do think there's merit to having, less flinch. I think like S&D specifically, I think the DLQ is better in some ways, but I think the versatility of the Locus and the ability to just put the stopping power mag on and off depending on how accurate you're feeling allows you to get used to the one sniper and then just change that one attachment based on how you're feeling. Whereas the DLQ, you're kind of just stuck with the DLQ as the way that it is. The attachments that you'll change on it are really only whether or not you have a FMJ or OWC laser. Everything else is pretty much the exact same with every DLQ build. I do think, though, if you're not building for ADS speed, which pretty much everyone does, I do think there's more passive play ability with the DLQ and building it in that way. But again, I just can't comprehend, based on looking at these stats and measuring all these things, why anyone would think the DLQ is better than the Locus. I really don't get it after, especially, just looking at all of these stats. As an aggressive sniper specifically, I can start to understand why people like it more for a slower playstyle, but this is what I got after looking at everything. Again, I'm pretty sad that I wasn't able to make this a more advanced video, but again, a full sniper breakdown is going to be coming in the future when I'm not, trying to get an upload out every day and I have a week or two to get all the data collected and perfectly presented. But hopefully this answered some questions that you may have had about the two snipers. So yeah, with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, make sure to drop a like and a sub down below, and I will see you guys later. Peace.